Rain doesn't fall in Harlow County. It arrives cold, deliberate, and without apology, the way all truly dangerous things do. It was a Tuesday in late November. The kind of day where the sky pressed down on the rural two-lane roads like a gray wool blanket soaked through with weeks of bad weather. The dispatch radio crackled with a sound like distant thunder. Elena Vasquez answered it anyway. She always did. Her rig, Unit 7, a battered white and orange Ford F-450 with 214,000 miles on the odometer and the heater that worked 60% of the time, sat idling at the intersection of County Road 9 and the old Harlow Mill bypass. Elena sat in the passenger seat with a paper cup of gas station coffee resting on her knee, steam curling off the surface. She wasn't drinking it. She was listening to the scanner. She listened to all of it. Her partner, Marcus Webb, was 24 years old, 8 months on the job, with a kind of enthusiasm that hadn't yet been ground down by years of back-to-back shifts. He was eating a granola bar, scrolling his phone. Elena had been a paramedic with Harlow County EMS for 2 years and 7 months. Before that, there was nothing, officially. Her employment record prior to her paramedic certification was a clean, blank expanse. Her references were a physician in El Paso who answered questions in sentences of 4 words or fewer, and a retired federal agent in Denver who changed the subject whenever someone asked how he knew her. She was 36 years old, 5'6", dark hair in a tight knot, eyes an unusual shade of amber, not quite gold, not quite brown, that people tended to remember long after they forgot everything else about her face. She had a small, deliberate scar at the corner of her left eyebrow, and the knuckles on both hands were discolored in a way that suggested they had absorbed significant impact over the years. She wore no jewelry. She carried no personal photographs. She did not socialize beyond professional necessity. She was, in the parlance of the people who had trained her for the work that did not appear on her official record, a ghost. She preferred it that way. The radio erupted. Unit 7, MVA, multi-vehicle, County Road 11, at the Harlow Mill Bridge overpass. Caller reports possible entrapment, fire en route. ETA on law enforcement unknown. Marcus reached for the mic. Elena's hand closed over his wrist. "I have it," she said. She keyed the radio. "Dispatch, Unit 7 responding. ETA 6 minutes. She set the coffee down and began pulling on her gloves. "Multi-vehicle on the bridge," Marcus said, talking himself through it the way young medics do. "Possible entrapment. That bridge is only 2 lanes. If there's a truck..." "There's a truck," Elena said. She said it with the certainty of someone who had drawn conclusions from a sufficient body of prior experience. She had heard the caller's voice crack on the word bridge. She had heard the rain in the background. She already knew it was a jackknifed semi. It was always a jackknifed semi. It was. They saw it from 300 yards out. The 18-wheeler had gone sideways across both lanes, its cab punched through the rusted guardrail and hanging over the gorge at a 40-degree angle. A silver sedan had gone under the trailer at speed, its roof sheared away. A pickup truck had rear-ended the sedan and was folded against the trailer's side skirt. Marcus let out a sharp breath. Elena was already out of the rig before it fully stopped, her trauma bag hitting her shoulder with a familiar, solid weight. "Sedan first," she said. "Roof is gone. Critical exposure. Start your assessment on the pickup. Watch your footing. There's fuel." She could smell it, diesel and gasoline mixing with the rain. She moved across the wet bridge deck with a low, quick certainty, not the careful shuffle of someone worried about falling, but the precise, adaptive movement of someone who had learned to navigate unstable environments the hard way. The sedan was bad. The driver was a woman in her early 40s. The roof had come down on her at chest height, compressing her thorax. She was conscious, breathing in rapid, shallow increments. Right lung compromised. Tension pneumothorax building fast. "I hear you," Elena said, even though the woman hadn't spoken. She was talking to the body, to the labored, asymmetric rise of the chest. "I hear you, I'm here." She ran her fingers along the woman's neck. Tracheal deviation, beginning. Subtle but present. Jugular veins distended on the right. The clinical picture assembled itself in her mind with cold efficiency. 4 minutes, maybe 5, before the mediastinum shifted far enough to crash the cardiac output entirely. She already had the 14-gauge angiocath in her hand. Unit 7 to dispatch. Critical trauma, female 40s. Suspected tension pneumothorax. Requesting immediate ALS backup and trauma alert at Harlow General. Expedite. She found the second intercostal space of the mid-clavicular line by feel, swabbed once, and drove the needle home. The hiss of escaping trapped air was immediate and profound. The woman's breathing changed. Rate dropped from 40 to 32 in seconds. Not saved, not yet, but bought time. Elena secured the catheter and reached for the chest seal. She heard the sirens. 2 of them. Police from the north coming fast. She didn't look up. She had 45 seconds left on this intervention, and she was not going to spend 3 of them looking at approaching headlights. The first cruiser hit the bridge and stopped hard. The second vehicle was a black Chevy Tahoe, polished to a liquid shine, with a grille light bar throwing red and blue across the rain. It belonged to Captain Drew Harlan. Harlon was 51 years old, 6'2", and built in the manner of a man who had been genuinely athletic at 28 and maintained just enough of it through willpower and vanity to remain physically imposing. He wore his uniform the way a flag is flown, with conspicuous, deliberate pride. He had been captain of Harlow County's patrol division for 6 years, which was 4 years longer than anyone who worked for him thought was healthy for the institution. He was not a bad man precisely. He was something more specific and perhaps more dangerous. A man who had never once been in a room where he was not the most important person present. This certainty had calcified over decades until it was indistinguishable from identity. He stepped out of the Tahoe and surveyed the scene with the proprietary air of a landowner walking a fence line. He saw the jackknifed semi. He saw the demolished pickup, where his deputy and Marcus were working. He saw the sedan with the missing roof, and he saw Elena Vasquez on her knees in the rain, performing what appeared to be a medical procedure with a speed and precision that registered somewhere in the back of his brain as distinctly unusual. He walked toward her. "Paramedic," he said. His voice was the voice of a man who expected acknowledgement. Elena didn't give it. Her hands were working. She was monitoring breath sounds with her palm flat against the woman's chest wall. "Paramedic," he said again, with more weight. "Give me a minute," Elena said. It wasn't rude. It was factual. Harlan stopped. He processed this. He was not accustomed to processing responses that didn't conform to his expectations. "I'm Captain Drew Harlan, Sheriff's Division. I am the incident commander at this scene. When I speak to you, I expect an immediate response." Elena finished her assessment, noted the bilateral improvement, reached for her radio, and updated dispatch before she turned to look at him. The look was not confrontational, not deferential. It was the look of someone who had spent years evaluating people with the same flat clinical precision she applied to everything else and who had arrived at a rapid, accurate conclusion. "Captain Harlan," she said, "your driver in the pickup needs extraction before we can assess his spine. The woman in this sedan has a decompressed tension pneumo and needs ALS intervention and transport in under 3 minutes. What do you need from me?" Harlan blinked. Just slightly. Elena saw it. "I need you to explain what you just did to that woman without asking for authorization," he said. "I performed a needle decompression to relieve a life-threatening tension pneumothorax," she said. "Standard ALS intervention, within my scope of practice under state EMS protocol. She would have died if I'd waited. Is there anything else, Captain, or can I get back to my patient?" Harlan's jaw tightened. He had just been educated efficiently and without sentiment by someone who had no institutional reason to defer to him. He knew it. He didn't like knowing it. You didn't secure the scene before treatment, he said. The scene was as secure as it was going to be, Elena said, turning back to her patient. I had a critical patient. Protocol requires scene safety assessment before patient contact. Protocol also requires ALS intervention before irreversible cardiac compromise. She pulled a blood pressure cuff from her bag. She had about 90 seconds when I got to her. Don't quote protocol at me, Harlan said, his voice dropping an octave. I've been on more scenes than you've had hot meals, young lady. Young lady. Elena's hands did not pause. Her face did not change. In a part of her that she kept locked and professionally inaccessible. She noted the phrase and set it aside with the practiced ease of someone who had been filing similar moments away for a very long time. I'm sure you have, she said. Blood pressure is 88/60. We need to move her in 2 minutes. We don't move anyone until I say we move, Harlan said. He stepped closer, using his height now, consciously or not. I am the incident commander. This is my scene. Elena looked up at him. The rain was running down the side of her face. Her amber eyes were completely still. Captain, she said, and her voice had changed, not louder, not angrier, just lower, more deliberate, the way a knife is more deliberate than a hammer. I understand your authority over this scene. I'm not disputing that. But I need you to hear me clearly. That woman will die if she is not in a trauma bay within 15 minutes. Not might die, will die. The intervention I performed bought her time. That time is running out. I need transport authorization. Now. Harlan stared at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Not softening, but something more complex. A flicker of genuine conflict. He was not without conscience. He simply had a large ego and a lifetime of unchallenged authority pressing down on top of it. Your protocols say you need my authorization for expedited transport from an MCI scene, he said. I haven't finished my assessment. Then assess the semi, Elena said. I'll move her. You will not move anyone without. Then I'm asking you to authorize it, Elena said. Please, right now. Please. The please was not weakness. Marcus would think about that moment for a long time afterward. It was the most controlled, most deliberate please he had ever heard. The please of someone who had decided, consciously, to try the civil option before the alternative. Harlan looked at her. He looked at the woman in the car. He looked at the bridge, the rain, the semi. 5 more minutes, he said. Give me 5 minutes, he said. Give me 5 minutes. Elena looked at the monitor. SPO 2 at 91, coming down. She doesn't have 5 minutes, Elena said. Then she's in good hands, he said, and there was an edge to it now. You said so yourself. You decompressed her. She's stable enough for 5 minutes. Elena turned back to her patient. Marcus, get the stretcher. Hey! Harlan's voice cracked across the bridge. I said stand down. That's an order. Elena moved toward the rig, her mind already on the packaging sequence, the fastest route to Harlow General's trauma bay. Harlan stepped in front of her. She stopped, 6 inches between them. Don't, she said quietly. You are obstructing a lawful order from a law enforcement officer, he said. His voice was low and hard, and he meant every word. Stand down, or I will place you in custody. You will place a paramedic in custody, Elena said, because she is trying to transport a dying woman. I will place a paramedic in custody because she is refusing a lawful command from the incident commander at a multi-casualty scene. That's obstruction. That's interference with an officer's lawful duties. Elena looked at him. The rain was running down her face. Her amber eyes were completely still. No anger, no fear, just a pure, exhausted recognition. She held out her wrists. It was not surrender. It was not compliance. It was the deliberate act of a person making absolutely certain that every consequence that followed would be unmistakably, undeniably the result of the choice being made by the man in front of her. Harlan hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then he unclipped his cuffs. The sound of them closing around Elena Vasquez's wrists was the loudest thing on that bridge. Marcus made a sound in his throat, something between a protest and a horrified exhale. "Captain, she was." "Back up, son," the deputy said, putting a hand on Marcus's arm. "Let the captain work." Harlan was already on his radio, calling for a second unit to cover the transport. His voice was controlled, professional. The voice of an officer executing a necessary enforcement action. He had told himself the story already. He had already arrived at the version where he was in the right. Elena stood in the rain with her hands cuffed behind her back and watched the woman in the sedan through the crumpled window. The monitor beat steadily. SpO2 still falling. 89. 88. She said nothing. She was waiting. She had been waiting for things, the right moment, the right terrible turn, for a very long time. She was exceptionally good at it. It was, in fact, one of the things she was best at in the world. The ambulance that came to replace her was staffed by 2 BLS providers. Good people doing their jobs, but without ALS certification. They looked at the decompressed tension pneumo with wide eyes and called for backup that was 14 minutes away. They packaged the woman carefully and moved her to the rig. She was alive, declining, slowly, in the measured way that injured people decline when they have slightly more time than they need. Elena sat in the back of Harlan's Tahoe with her hands cuffed behind her and watched the ambulance leave. Harlan was outside the vehicle, on his phone. She could see his jaw moving through the rain-streaked window. He was building his case. He was a thorough man. He understood the architecture of institutional protection, and he was laying the foundation of it with methodical care. She looked at her own reflection in the glass. She looked tired, not afraid, just tired. Her radio, clipped to her left shoulder, was still active. Harlan had not removed it, probably hadn't even thought to. That was the kind of detail that a man accustomed to authority tends to overlook, because authority itself is supposed to be sufficient. She waited. 11 minutes after the cuffs went on, her radio crackled. It was not dispatch. It was not Marcus. It was a voice she had not heard in 2 years and 4 months. A voice with the particular precise, clipped quality of someone who had spent 20 years speaking in secure communications channels and had eventually stopped being able to sound any other way. Unit 7. This is Colonel David Rains, Department of Defense Medical Operations. I need to speak with the paramedic. The deputy standing outside the Tahoe turned and stared at the radio on Elena's shoulder. Elena closed her eyes. Just for a second. She opened them. "I'm here," she said. "We're tracking an incident on the Harlow Mill Bridge, Harlow County," Rains said. His voice carried no drama. "I have a report of a law enforcement detention of a licensed paramedic at an active MCI scene." "Confirm." "Confirmed," Elena said. A pause. In that pause, only the sound of rain on the Tahoe roof. "Who is the detaining officer?" "Captain Drew Harlan, Harlow County Sheriff's Division." Another pause. Slightly longer. "All right," Rains said. "Sit tight." The radio went quiet. The deputy was already walking around to the driver's door. He leaned in, his face pale. "Ma'am, what was that transmission?" "Department of Defense Medical Operations," Elena said. He blinked. He walked quickly to where Harlan was still on his phone. "Said something." Harlan looked up. Something about the deputy's face cut through the narrative the captain was constructing for himself. He walked back to the Tahoe. He pulled open the rear door and looked at Elena. She sat with her cuffed hands behind her, rain still drying on her face, her amber eyes steady. "You want to tell me," Harlan said, and his voice had lost something, not all its authority but the easy automatic certainty of it, "what the Department of Defense wants with a paramedic from Harlow County EMS." Elena met his eyes. "No," she said, "not yet." He stared at her. Then he walked back to his driver's door and answered his radio. Elena listened to his half of it. Yes, this is Captain Harlan. I'm not sure I understand the jurisdiction here, sir. She is a civilian? Yes. Yes, I understand. I apologize, Colonel. Can you say that again? Her designation is… A long pause. I see. And the Secretary's office is aware of, I understand. Yes, sir. Understood. He got out of the car. He stood in the rain for a moment. Just stood. A man who had just learned something that required a period of stillness to absorb. He came around to the rear door. He opened it. He reached in and removed the cuffs from Elena's wrists. He did it without ceremony, without theater. He just did it, the way you correct a mistake when you finally understand it was one. Elena brought her hands around in front of her and rubbed her left wrist. The cuff had been tight. I need to get to the hospital, she said. I know, Harlon said. His voice was flat and strange. My patient. I know, he said again. Get in your rig. She climbed out of the Tahoe. She walked to Unit 7. Marcus was waiting by the passenger side, his face a complicated landscape of relief and confusion. He opened his mouth. Not now, Elena said quietly. Get me to Harlow General. Marcus drove fast and well. The siren carved a path through the rain-slicked county roads, and Elena sat with her hands on her thighs, the red marks from the cuffs still visible at her wrists, watching the wet grey road unreal ahead of them through the windshield. It wore its age with dignified, functional exhaustion. Fluorescent lights buzzed. The linoleum had been mopped so many thousands of times that the pattern was gone in certain spots. The attending physician on duty was Dr. Jerome Aldridge, 11 years in this hospital. Enough experience to recognize something unusual when it was standing in front of him. He was examining the needle decompression site on the woman from the sedan when Elena walked through the door. The woman's name, Elena would learn, was Patricia Doyle. 52 years old. A third-grade teacher from the north part of the county, driving home from a parent-teacher conference. Vasquez, Aldridge said. I heard you had some trouble at the scene. She needs a chest tube, Elena said. Compensated for about 15 minutes, but the underlying injury is progressive. EFE2 was 88 when I left her. Tracheal deviation on the right. I have her, Aldridge said. He was already reading the portable X-ray. You did good work out there. He paused, looking at the film. She'd be gone. He looked at Elena. You all right? Elena looked at her wrists. The marks were fading. I'm fine, she said. She stepped back from the direct clinical space and let Aldridge and his team work. She watched through the window as they placed the chest tube with practiced efficiency, as Patricia Doyle's breathing eased and her oxygen saturation climbed to numbers that meant survival was no longer conditional. Elena watched until she was certain. Then she walked out into the hallway. She sat down in a plastic chair against the wall. She put her elbows on her knees and her face in her hands. She was not crying. Elena Vasquez had not cried, not once, in 2 years and 7 months. She had learned, over the course of a career that predated her paramedic certification by nearly a decade, that emotion was not the enemy of function, but that its timing was everything, and that this was not the right time. She was simply tired. Marcus sat down next to her. He didn't say anything for almost a full minute. A significant act of maturity from a 24-year-old in the immediate aftermath of watching his partner get handcuffed on a bridge in the rain. Who is Colonel Rains? He finally said. An old colleague, Elena said. From where? She didn't answer. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding that the absence of an answer was itself a kind of answer. Is this going to be a thing? He said. The Harlan situation. Because he's going to file something. He's going to say you refused a lawful order. And whatever the DOD said to him, that's not going to show up in any official record. He's going to manage how this looks, protect his position. That's what he does. Elena looked at him. There was something almost surprised in it, not at the content, but at the accuracy. This 24-year-old who ate granola bars and scrolled his phone on slow Tuesday afternoons had read the situation that cleanly. "You're right," she said. "That's probably how it works. So what do we do?" Elena leaned back in the chair. She tilted her head up and looked at the buzzing fluorescent lights. "We wait," she said. She did not have to wait as long as she expected. Drew Harlan arrived at Harlow General 40 minutes later. No hat. Still in his rain-damp uniform, which meant he hadn't gone home to change and build his composure. He had come directly to the hospital because something was driving him that was stronger than the instinct to collect himself first. Elena heard his boots on the linoleum before she saw him. Heavy, assertive, the walk of a large man accustomed to rooms rearranging themselves for his arrival. He stopped when he saw her in the plastic chair. Something was different about his face. The aggressive authority was still structural. It would take more than a phone call to fully dismantle it, but underneath, some layer of absolute certainty had gone soft. He walked toward her and stopped 2 feet away. "The woman is going to make it," he said. "I know," Elena said. He looked at her wrists. The marks were still visible. His jaw moved. "I made a call," he said. "To the DOD number. To get context." He stopped. Started again. "The colonel told me something about your background. Some of it. He said the rest was classified." She said nothing. "He mentioned 6 languages," Harlan said slowly. Elena looked at the bulletin board across the hall. "Infection control guidelines. A hand-drawn birthday card for someone named Dr. P. And something about a 2-year operation in Central America that he couldn't give details, but the language he used." He stopped. He looked like a man who had been handed a map of a country he'd never heard of, trying to determine which direction to face. He used the phrase, "uniquely qualified." And I've heard that phrase applied to a lot of people, and it's usually meaningless. But the way he said it wasn't. Elena turned her head and looked at him. He held her gaze. It took something from him. She could see that. "I want to understand," he said, "what it is that you actually are, because what that colonel described doesn't fit with." He gestured at the hospital hallway, her uniform. "With this. This is what I chose," Elena said. "Why?" It was a genuine question. He actually wanted to know. Elena was quiet for a moment. "Then, because it's real. What I do here is real. The woman in Trauma Bay 1 is real. The interventions are real. The outcomes are real." She paused. "The other work, the outcomes were real, but the rest of it wasn't always. The reasons changed depending on who was making them. What's real here is just the person in front of you, and whether they live or die. I can work with that." Harlan looked at her for a long time. "I put you in cuffs," he said. "Yes," she said, "because I thought you were being insubordinate. Because I thought you were ignoring the proper chain of, 'I know what you thought,'" Elena said. "And now I know something different," he said. "I know that the person I cuffed had a history I didn't understand. I know the DOD knows her name and her radio frequency. I know the colonel described her in terms that made me feel differently about the decision I made." He paused. "But none of that changes whether the decision was right." Elena looked at him sharply. "She was dying," Elena said simply. "I was trying to move her. You stopped me. That was the decision, the rest of it. My background, the classified work, 6 languages, whatever the colonel told you, that doesn't change what happened on the bridge." He stood very still. "No," he said after a long moment. "It doesn't." They looked at each other across the buzzing hospital hallway. 2 people on opposite ends of a long, complicated mistake. "I'm going to file an incident report," Elena said. "Not to create a problem for you, because it's the right thing to do. Because if it happens again, if someone else in this county gets cuffed because they're trying to move a dying patient, there should be a record." Harlan's jaw tightened. Then, slowly, it released. "That's fair," he said. Elena stood up. She was nearly a foot shorter than him, but she held herself in a way that made the height irrelevant. "Patricia Doyle's family's in the waiting room," she said. "Dr. Aldridge says she'll make a full recovery." She paused. "She's a third-grade teacher. Her kids are going to have her back. That's what happened on that bridge tonight, in case you want to think about what the outcome was." She walked down the hallway toward the ambulance bay, her boots quiet on the linoleum, and the buzzing fluorescent lights lit her way without ceremony. The call came through the next morning. Elena was back in the rig. Wednesday, gray again. The rain gone, but the sky still carrying the memory of it. Her personal phone rang. A Washington area code, a number she didn't recognize, which meant it had been recently generated, created specifically for this call. She answered it. "Vasquez," she said. "Captain, not Colonel Rains." A different voice, older, quieter, in the way that very powerful people sometimes become quiet because they no longer need volume to accomplish anything. "This is General Marcus Hayes. I apologize for the method of contact. We're using a clean channel." She said nothing. "Waiting." "I have a situation," Hayes said. "I need a medical consultant. Civilian position, voluntary, full federal protection of your current identity and employment. Approximately 60 days of your time over the next 6 months. The nature of the work is consistent with your prior experience." Elena looked out the windshield at the flat, wet county road stretching ahead. "General," she said, "I'm a paramedic in Harlow County." "I know," he said. "I also know what happened on that bridge last night. I know what you did for Patricia Doyle. I know what it cost you to get her there." A pause. "The woman who did what you did on that bridge is not someone who should be sitting in a cold ambulance waiting for the radio to crackle. She should be—" "I'm exactly where I should be," Elena said. A silence. Respectful. "All right," Hayes said. "I understand, but the offer stands. Indefinitely. If you change your mind—" "I know how to reach you," Elena said. "If I need to." "Yes," Hayes said, "you do." The line went quiet. She set the phone on the console. Marcus looked at her from the driver's seat. He'd heard enough to have a general sense of the shape of it. "Pentagon," he said. "Something like that," she said. He nodded. He looked back at the road. "You know," he said, after a moment, "I've been thinking about how you knew it was a jackknifed semi before we even got there." "Pattern recognition," Elena said. "Yeah," Marcus said, "but it's not just pattern recognition, is it?" She didn't answer. He drove. The radio crackled with routine traffic, a medical alarm on the east side, a fender bender on Route 12, the ordinary business of a county emergency service on a Wednesday morning. Elena listened to all of it. She reached for the paper cup of cold coffee in the holder. Had been cold for hours, and drank it without complaint. Quietly, completely, without waste. That afternoon, Drew Harlan filed an internal report. It was accurate, all of it. He wrote down what happened on the bridge in the sequence it happened, in language that did not obscure his decision or the reasons behind it. He wrote the words adhered in judgment in a sentence referring to his own actions, a sentence he had never written before in 23 years of law enforcement. He submitted it without showing it to anyone first. Then he drove to the hospital and asked to speak to someone from Patricia Doyle's family. Her sister was there, a woman in her late 40s with the same practical Midwestern face, still wearing a coat with rain on the shoulders. He told her what Elena had done on the bridge. He told her exactly. He did not minimize or editorialize. He told her about the needle in the rain, the cuffs, the woman on her knees in the dark who did not stop working. The sister listened. Then she started to cry, quietly, in the overwhelmed way of people who have spent hours in waiting rooms absorbing the full weight of how close the world came to being different. When she composed herself, she asked for the paramedic's name. "Vasquez," he said. "Elena Vasquez." The sister wrote it down. 3 weeks later, a commendation arrived. not from the county or the state EMS board, from a federal office whose full name Elena was instructed not to publicize. The letter used formally careful, deliberately vague language, but was, in its totality, an acknowledgement of service that extended well beyond anything a county emergency service would have authorized. Elena read it once, folded it, put it in the lockbox under her bed, next to the other things she kept there: her photograph, her dog tag with someone else's name on it, a small worn notebook with 6 entries in 3 different languages. Then she went back to work. She always did, because the radio always crackled, because someone was always at the end of that crackle who needed someone to know what to do. Because between the protocol manual and the bridge in the rain, between the academic theory and the woman dying in the 45th second of attention pneumothorax, there is a gap that can only be filled by a person who has been in enough terrible places to know exactly how to move through them. Elena Vasquez had been in enough terrible places. She drove through the flat gray county, the rig's engine rumbling with patient certainty beneath her, and she listened to all of it. The scanner, the road, the weather, the particular frequency of trouble when it was still far away and moving in her direction. She was 36 years old. She spoke 6 languages. She had no official history. She was precisely where she had chosen to be. She waited. When the radio crackled, she answered. If Elena's story of quiet, extraordinary strength kept you riveted, if you felt the truth in that rain-soaked bridge and in everything she chose not to say, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs a reminder that the most remarkable people in any room are rarely the ones talking the loudest. Subscribe for more stories of hidden heroes living extraordinary lives in ordinary places. And drop a comment. Do you think Elena made the right call staying in Harlow County? Or should she have taken General Hayes's offer?